You've seen that natural disasters such as droughts and floods can cause disruptions to nature, knocking it out of balance for many, many years. It takes a long time to restore Earth's balance of nature once its natural cycles are disrupted. You have also learned that sudden changes are far worse than gradual changes. Humans are guilty of causing some of the most rapid changes to nature. Today, we are going to look at a few of the ways humans have upset the equilibrium of nature on planet Earth. We have made drastic changes to Earth in an attempt to meet our needs. Many of these changes are a result of the growing number of people on the planet. It is Earth's overpopulation. The human population has exploded. There are 2 babies born every second somewhere in the world. In 2011, the world's population reached 7 billion people. That's a lot of mouths to feed. More homes are needed to house all of these people, and more natural resources are required to meet the energy needs. Deforestation takes place, and this cleared out space is used to grow food and to build cities and towns. Grasslands and wetlands are also being destroyed for agricultural purposes, making space for crops. Some animals have been overhunted. Wild animals and plants are being squeezed out of their natural habitats to make room for all the humans, just like the deer that you heard about earlier. In a natural ecosystem, animals eat only a small portion of the plants in their habitat. Other plants die and decompose or break down, returning the nutrients back to the soil. Over time, humans have developed farming methods and have changed this natural order of things. In the past century, farmers have begun planting large amounts of crops. Sometimes they farmed continuously on the same plot of land, not allowing enough time for the soil's nutrients to be replenished. You heard about the Dust Bowl in the previous read aloud, and you will read more about it later. It was a prime example of humans changing the environment, thereby partially causing a terrible disaster that drought alone may not have caused. Once farmers used up the naturally occurring nutrients in the soil, they thought it would be best to add back some nutrients themselves. Some farmers use organic fertilizers in the form of animal or human waste. However, more and more farmers have developed artificial nutrients, called chemical fertilizers, to speed the growth of their crops. Soil cannot hold all of the added fertilizer. Some fertilizers leach into the earth, contaminating our groundwater. When rain comes down, the loose excess soil with it added fertilizers is carried into the neighboring rivers and streams. Fertilizers can be extremely damaging, sometimes causing toxic algae to grow. When fertilizers enter streams, they help form large blooms of algae. When the algae blooms die, they deplete the oxygen in the water that is needed to feed the animal life. Some algae have toxins in them. A toxic or poison food chain is created. Tiny aquatic animals feed on the poisonous algae. Next, small fish become poisoned when they feed on the tiny aquatic animals that have eaten the poisonous algae. Then, large fish eat the small poisoned fish and end up being poisoned as well. Birds and other animals that eat the large fish end up being poisoned. Links in the contaminated food chain may break at any level. As a result, food webs are also changed. Nature's equilibrium is disrupted and knocked off balance. Along with the use of fertilizers, farming methods have changed in other ways as well. Have you ever driven past fields of corn or soybeans that just seem to go on forever and ever? In nature, a variety of different plants grow side by side, but farmers today often plant miles and miles of a single crop. Remember that eating diverse types of food helps the survival of a species, and having a variety of living organisms creates a healthy ecosystem. Crops also do best when planted with diversity or variety. Having miles of a single crop disrupts the balance of nature. There is less pest resistance, and when pests attack the crops, they do a lot of damage. So then, farmers fight the pests with pesticides. When pesticides were first introduced, farmers welcomed them with open arms. What a miracle, they said. Finally, we can grow plants with fewer pests. But it was too good to be true. The pesticides killed more than they were intended to kill. One pesticide, DDT, was once widely used to kill mosquitoes and other annoying pests. The insects that were poisoned by the DDT were eaten by fish, and the fish were eaten by birds such as hawks and eagles. Think about the contaminated food chain you heard about with the algae, the fish, and the birds. How might pesticides disrupt or ruin food chains? Listen, and you'll be able to hear about one disrupted food chain. At one point, the bald eagle, America's national bird, was endangered due to DDT. The DDT made the bald eagles unable to have babies because their eggs were too weak to survive. Pesticides are unsafe for humans too. Think back to the diagram of the girl eating an apple. Would you want to eat an apple that had been sprayed with pesticides? As the toxins build up over time, they may produce cancers and other diseases in humans. Realizing how dangerous these pesticides are, farmers began to look for other ways to fight pests. Some farmers decided to try biological pest control. In other words, why not bring in another species, one that feeds naturally on the pests, thereby controlling the pest population without any dangerous chemicals? But in many cases, this solution often backfired. One such example is the case of the cane toad in Australia. Cane toads are named for the sugarcane plant. Here's why. Beetles were eating all of the sugarcane plants in Australia. Australian farmers heard that the giant toads of South America loved to eat beetles, so they packed and crated the toads onto ships and sailed them halfway around the world as a pesticide-free solution to this problem. But guess what? These toads were used to wet, shady habitat in which they rested during the day and only ate at night. Their new habitat was quite sunny and very dry. Pretty soon, the toads began wandering off from the sugarcane fields to the cooler, wetter gardens in the surrounding towns. They found lots of bugs to eat there, and without any natural predators, the toads began to multiply. Pretty soon, Australia had more toads than they could handle, and the beetles were still happily destroying all of those sugarcane plants. Cane toads are called an invasive species. Invasive species are living things that invade a habitat by expanding rapidly, often affecting the organisms around them. Invasive species are moved from their native habitat to a foreign one. Usually, this is done by humans. Farmers purposefully brought cane toads to Australia, but invasive species may also enter habitats uninvited or even accidentally. With all of the different modes of transportation today, such as cargo ships, planes, and trains, it is very easy to have plants and animals enter into a habitat other than on their own. A foreign species could accidentally be carried on someone's boots or on the side of a ship without anyone ever even realizing it. Invasive species have the ability to change whole ecosystems upon their arrival. Farming practices are just one way we have damaged the earth. We all have also built large factories for manufacturing or creating all sorts of goods. Many of these manufacturing plants, often built beside rivers, have caused water pollution from the chemicals that are dumped into the rivers for many years, resulting in killing and contaminating all the fish in these water. Pollutants from these manufacturing plants are carried up the food chain, and even humans become sick from their own poisonous pesticides. How might the water pollution work through the food chain and make us sick as humans? Some rivers that were once a source of food for many people have become unsafe places for us to fish. Have you ever been behind a car with a stinky exhaust pipe or seen smoke pouring out of a factory smokestack? These are visible air pollutants, creating thick smog in many cities and crowded areas. There are also, however, things that pollute the air, such as some emissions from factories that we cannot see. Anything that does not harmlessly evaporate pollutes the air that we breathe, causing problems for plants and animals all along our food chain. Humans burn lots of fossil fuels, such as gas, coal, and oil, all for energy. Fossil fuels are formed from the fossils or remains of the prehistoric organisms. These fuels release toxic gas into the air and becomes trapped in the Earth's natural cycles. Mixing with the water in the air, chemicals form acid rain. Acid rain is formed when the water in the air mixes with toxic gases. Rain, sleet, hail, or snow can carry these gases and are all known as acid rain. In the same way, anything that you pour down the drain may end up polluting Earth's water or air. As you have learned, water is constantly being cycled through Earth's atmosphere, and all water eventually makes its way back to the ocean. There is yet another form of pollution called light pollution. Though light pollution is not toxic to breathe like air pollution is, it does reduce the magnificent number of bright twinkling stars in the sky that you see with your naked eye every night. Burning fossil fuels also releases gases into the air that trap heat in the atmosphere. This extra heat is changing the climate on Earth. Global temperatures are rising, and this has already affected ecosystems around the world. Birds and butterflies are arriving earlier in the spring. Plants flower and lose their leaves earlier. Some spiders, beetles, and grasshoppers are moving north to find cooler and more comfortable climates. Like the eastern wild turkey, they have been forced out of their habitat because they cannot adapt. It is hard to predict what will happen, but there is much that you and I can do to help protect our planet from damaging changes. Next time we meet, we will talk about some of the ways that you can help us protect the planet Earth.